Thank you to Karis and the JUNO organization for this great honor and recognition. And thank you, Serena and Dean, for that lovely introduction. These two unique music figures and personalities represent the ultimate and ideal examples of the artistry and commerce border I have happily straddled, embraced, and interacted with over the past 44 years in Canada. I go back with Dean to 1972. As a teenager, fresh out of high school, he already had a full-time, paid job in the Capitol warehouse. He offered to work for my Daffodil Records label for free on a trial basis for 6 months. Now that's commitment. How could I resist? I took him on. Within a few weeks, suffice to say, Dean's work ethic and enthusiasm for his job, as well as my artists, ensured he became the label's paid product manager. Dean returned to Capitol, EMI, a few years later, and you all know the rest. During his Daffodil years, Dean also introduced me to the songwriter and lead singer of his high school band, Tom Cochran. I signed him to the label shortly thereafter. The three of us have remained great friends ever since. And how about Serena? She is living proof of the saying, you cannot keep a great, naturally talented, awesome talent down. They will always find a way to be heard. And let me assure you, And let me assure you, if any further assurance was needed, in Randy Bachman's immortal words, you ain't seen nothing yet. Thank you. My thanks also to Kim Clark-Champness and his team for all their work in putting together that video we just saw. 2014 marks my 50th year in the music industry. Thank you. Little did I know back in 1964 where these 50 years would take me. I was 18 and wanted to be a record producer, hear what I produced on Radio Caroline and Radio Luxembourg. After being admitted to Strasbourg University that year, I applied to be the French correspondent to Billboard. I'd been a private subscriber to the magazine since I started at Naval Academy at the age of 13. Their European director was my only direct contact in the music industry. Amazingly, I was accepted, and more amazingly, started to work for them for the grand salary of 12 LPs of my choice per article submitted. Needless to say, I submitted a lot of articles. When I returned to the UK, and began working as a management trainee for EMI in London in 1966. It was the world's largest, most successful, and longest-standing record company in history. It was the home of the Beatles and many other emerging British invasion artists with whom I had had the good fortune to work. My very first week at EMI was spent at the Abbey Road studios. I arranged interviews for some of those artists, and the uncredited, that's another story, in-house A&R trio of George Martin, Ron Richards, and John Burgess. These three guys were responsible for three of EMI's biggest acts at that time, the Fab Four, of course, the Hollies, and Manfred Mann, respectively. The first of many Manchester Square basement auditions I attended at their invitation was the Syd Barrett era Pink Floyd. That's how far back I go. What 19-year-old would not be smitten by such incredible excess? And I was. Arguably, the UK was the center of the pop universe then. Canada now. I say that with great deference to my primary musical muse, Bob Dylan, and the band too. There's a good reason why my publishing divisions were later called Freewheeled Music, Magnetic Movements, Reels of Rhyme, and Gypsy Hymns. I reconnected with George Martin and John Burgess from Canada a few years later. George produced 2 albums I released by the Huggett family, a Canadian group living in Ottawa. I'm happy to say that I have signed many of my artists with EMI and Capitol ever since, most recently bringing Serena to the label 8 years ago, if my memory serves me well. So back in London, while looking after the whims, caprices, and deadlines of foreign writers scrambling for stories on British artists, I ran into an Australian journalist. He ended up changing the course of my career and therefore my life. That Aussie was Richie York, author, broadcaster, and music historian. Yeah. He would soon move to Canada and become an early CanCon activist and a promoter of Canadian artists, which he continues to this day. Richie is responsible for my decision to move to Canada. He organized a meeting in London with rompin' Ronnie Hawkins in the summer of '69. The Hawk wanted to launch a Canadian record company. So, in the penthouse suite of the Playboy Club that summer, an Englishman, an Aussie, and a transplanted Arkansas rockabilly star conceived the all-Canadian Love Productions and its Daffodil Records. Thank you. An auspicious start to any life. I arrived in Canada in early 1970. We launched Daffodil, signed the King Biscuit Boy and Crowbar, and Canada has been my home ever since. Richie became the unwitting catalyst for me meeting and marrying a Canadian girl, having 3 daughters and 3 grandchildren, all born here, with a 4th on the way. Yeah. I am so pleased that Richie and Minnie made the long trip from their home in Brisbane to attend this event in person tonight. Good on you, Cobber. So it was 1970. Walt Grealis, Stan Cleese, John Mills, Arnold Gossovich, Richie, Pierre JUNO, the chairman of the CRTC, and a handful of other such advocates had won their long-fought battle for a Canadian content ruling. The industry in general, and most importantly the public, have enjoyed and benefited from it ever since. I was in the right place at the right time. I produced, published, and released Crowbar's Oh What a Feeling, the first ever CanCon recording. We released it the day the CanCon rulings went into effect in 1971. And so 4 decades of discovering, nurturing, and developing Canadian artists and songwriters have unfolded for me. These have resulted in a number of triumphs, some real heartbreaks, and a few failures. No matter their commercial outcome, countless wonderful, inspired, and original recordings of songs that deserve to be heard were given that opportunity. I am proud to have been able to make that possible. There are so many people to thank for the important roles they played over my career in Canada. It would be impossible to do justice to all of these in a few minutes, so I plan to use my Let Me Be Frank website to do so. But please indulge me while I mention a few very special people tonight. All giants in the industry who have worked long and hard to make it what it is today. I am proud to say that they have become lifelong friends outside of the work we've done together. I had written a whole piece on each of these people, but of course time flies when you're receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award, and I thank you already for indulging me this far. From EMI to Love Productions and Daffodil Records to GRT and ATV, from TMP to MCA and Olay, they have let me be frank and helped me to nourish the music I love. Peter Steinmetz, Bill Ballard and Myron Wolfe, together with Michael Cole, Dean Cameron, Arnold Gossovich, Rupert Perry, Ross Reynolds, Sam Trust, Vicky Walters, Michael McCarthy, Leeds Levy, Sam Feldman, and Robert Ott. I would also especially like to remember tonight my dear friend and record label partner, Bill Ballard, who died just 2 weeks ago. To Billy, life was not a dress rehearsal. He was a one-of-a-kind, smart, larger-than-life, big-hearted, lovable guy. Those who knew him will greatly miss his generous spirit and immense love of life, and of course, food. Go crazy in heaven's kitchen, Billy. And obviously, I couldn't possibly forget the heart and soul of my work, all the talented songwriters, artists, and musicians with whom my career has been shared and enjoyed. This award is dedicated to them. They are our lifeline. Without them, we are nowhere, man. Again, far, far too many to name and thank here, but let me quickly mention Eddie Schwartz, David Tyson, Ron Hines, Tom Cochran, Murray McLaughlin, Huey Leggett, Richard Newell, Kelly J, Ian Thomas, Graham Shaw, Alfie Zappacosta, Dan Hill, Gerald O'Brien, Steve Sexton, Byron Hill, Dean McTaggart, John Capek, Klaatu, Steve McKinnon, to name just a few. I created the Canadian Songwriters Hall of Fame in 1998 to honor and celebrate the unsung heroes of our industry. I urge, thank you. I urge the Songwriters Hall of Fame's current board to play catch-up in recognizing more of these deserving candidates annually. I encourage them to keep the bar at the highest level while still honoring as many of these great Canadians in their lifetime as possible. I believe this should be a primary goal of the Songwriters Hall of Fame under its new SOCAN affiliation. In February 1970, I had the pleasure of attending the very first JUNO Awards. It was then known as the Gold Leaf Awards and was created by Walt Grealis and Stan Cleese. Walt died 10 years ago, but I know he'd be happy to see the effects of his dedication to Canadian music is still being felt, as it will be for many years to come. And finally, the people who make the circle complete and my life whole, those who have shared it all. Linda, a beautiful woman, a fiery advocate, a much-loved wife and wonderful mother, not to mention an awesome psychedelic soprano and a great song plugger too. And my three lovely, real blonde bombshells, my daughters, Megan, Emily, and Kate, all of whom are here with me tonight, and believe me, they are not just pretty faces. Here's to Will, Alice, and Georgia, the next generation of Canadian music lovers, and thank you again for this and for your patience.